Well, if you would work on it with me, I'd like to try and say something now about self-remembering and what self we're really trying to remember. It's just a week after Thanksgiving, and I suppose that none of you at your family Thanksgivings greeted each other the way our ancestors used to on such occasions. May God be with you. Or even in the more abbreviated form that took later, God be with you, which we now shorten again to goodbye. But much more recently, Star Trek and other such influences have revived the phrase, may the force be with you. So what's all this about? What force? What Lord? What God? Perhaps for us we could understand it to mean the sensation of aliveness that I sometimes can feel in my body when I pay attention to a life force that I am aware is in the body, in me, but is clearly not just my body doing its habitual functions while I think my great thoughts. Could this sense of aliveness be an indicator of the self that we are trying to remember as much of our waking time as possible, but with, let's face it, a notable lack of success? So I would like to propose that even while I'm speaking, you are also searching through the experience of this question, and we explore it together. So now we're sitting here in this space, firmly convinced, each of us, that we are separate individuals, men and women, entirely independent of one another and of our surroundings, pursuing our separate thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and totally unaware of a larger view, unaware, that is, of an underlying reality of ourselves and of the world as a whole. Even after many years of trying to remember myself, I am still, except in very brief moments, not aware of this reality. Thinking about it, yes. The reality, however, is unthinkable, non-conceptual. And that's where we get stuck. Until we eventually see that there can be, in flashes, a pure awareness experience with no associations at all. When I first heard about self-remembering, I began, I suppose like most of you, with a strong attraction to the idea of self-development, an ambition to achieve it, and a conviction that my teachers knew something I badly needed to understand if I was to make any progress towards this great goal. Only gradually did it dawn on me that my personal development was only a possible byproduct of pursuing diligently but selflessly a much greater goal, to serve something immeasurably higher than myself, than me. How to be more open to that became my question. What were the obstacles? That's when the tension between me and I began. Before that, when I said I meant me. Indeed, the Oxford Dictionary, when you look under me, says, see I. Certainly, I saw quite early that however attached I might be to thinking about things, I'm not my thoughts. That's when who am I became a real question. Later, it became apparent that I am not my feelings, not my reactions, not even my physical body either. My personality is what rules my actions, and others assume that it is who I am. But in my heart, I know I am essentially not that. My essence is my being, my presence, what I actually am. Whatever that may be at this moment, shorn of the hereditary and environmental conditioning that has formed my shell of personality. Still, an inherent ambiguity remains, since I am constantly thinking and acting as if I am my body, my feelings, my thoughts, the whole functional carriage that Gurdjieff writes about, driven by a distracted coachman, pulled this way and that by a neglected, undernourished horse, picking up stray passengers, and without any one master at all in charge. Is that me? With no I? But this analogy strikes home, if we allow it to, so that I begin to acknowledge the real state of affairs and detach from my early dream of carrying the world on my shoulders and becoming at least man number 5 or bust. Like everyone else, I had to learn, and am still learning, that no arrogant, self-centered attitude is an obstacle, not only in relations with others, but in blocking any input from above. There are objective laws ordering my subjective chaos. King Canute ruined his regal career when he forbade the tide to rise. And the rest of us are quite familiar with our Walter Mitty tendencies to dream our lives away instead of living in reality. However distasteful staying with my pretension may be to my ego. It is becoming clearer that self-remembering is not self-involvement, that the self is not the overweening personality, me, but this higher self, the self that I am. What is that? If we take self-remembering to mean remembering myself, paying attention to me, we can very quickly develop a self-inflation that only makes my natural egotism worse. This perhaps explains why in his Paris groups during the war, Gurdjieff so often demanded that his pupils see their complete lack of being, their nothingness. You merde, he would say. Nullity, piece of meat. If we take the risk of saying I am as a spiritual practice, we better understand early on that this I is not my insignificant little me. For inflation of ego is not the way to I am. It is the way towards making a business of work on oneself and a deviation of the teaching. It is a temptation to which some of the nominal Gurdjieff groups with no lineage are particularly prone, but our leaders are not immune to this inflation either, nor are those of other genuine lineages, as we have seen in America in recent years. Even if we lesser mortals too often appropriate for ourselves the energy that comes from the self, every practitioner of self-remembering must be aware of this danger. Another risk on the way of I am is that I grow weary of working on myself. And I start complaining that I'm getting nowhere and that the work doesn't work. And even after I begin to get flashes of a totally new state, I go on in my habitual negativity to complain that it doesn't last and that I cannot maintain a sense of presence in my ordinary life after all these years. Isn't that the problem? We were told, remember yourself. And we heard, remember yourself. Only gradually, and not without remorse and suffering, do I come to see the miracle of a moment of really seeing myself. And the realization dawns that that seeing is not mine, but is, as has been said long ago, the self seeing the self. When I am, I can be remembered. I have a part to play in the process, yes, but the energy flow is from top down, not from me to the self. In spite of these misunderstandings and risks in such practices, I am has a very honorable history in Christianity and Judaism. In the Old Testament, it is the secret name of God. I am that I am. The Gospel of St. John is very close to our teaching in this respect. Ravi Ravindra has made that point very thoroughly in the Yoga of Christ. What Gurdjieff calls theomertmalogos also has much in common with St. John's word logos. Even more striking is the scholarly, more accurate translation of the Greek text of St. John, quoting Christ as saying, I am is the way, the truth, and the life. In Greek, the word is usually not written down because it is obvious to the reader and therefore unnecessary. The great Anglican scholar Archbishop Temple is our authority on this point. St. John's Gospel is full of I am, and so is the early Christian church for about the first 4 or 5 centuries. When Gurdjieff told Ouspensky that he could think of the work as esoteric Christianity, I think that this was what he meant. The Christianity, as he actually said, that existed long before Christ, and which he later called the Fourth Way, the common ancestor of all the great religious traditions. In every culture, poets as well as philosophers and spiritual practitioners have for centuries perceived something of this I am, this omnipresent reality. Some poets, like Rabindranath Tagore, have called it the river of life, coursing through our veins at this moment, throbbing with vitality in every part of our bodies whenever we pay attention to it. And not only in us, but in other animals, extending through the earth into every blade of grass, every flower and leaf, bursting out all over, and perceptible in us as a flowing river of energy. If this perception is not a fantasy, and its independent expression reiterated in all traditions over thousands of years suggests that it is not, then these sensitive, intuitive poets may know something that the rest of us would do well to learn if we are to be truly human beings, and that is that there is only one river, always, everywhere. Today, the physicists are adding to our understanding of the river, coming at it from a purely empirical, scientific point of view. They are, in effect, saying that the river has no center, no circumference, no boundaries in space or in time. It is a unified field force. The intelligent, formless energy of space, the zero-point vacuum flux, and it is literally everywhere, inside and outside every form. This cup holds space, and the same space surrounds it. The same is true of the space inside and around our skin-encapsulated bodies. Right now, we are breathing great cupfuls of this field of empty space. And it goes on all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Every breath is brimful of energy and information that we are too limited to be aware of, except in a tiny window of the electromagnetic spectrum that happens to be accessible to our poor senses. As many modern technologies, television and cell phones, for example, demonstrate, this field is very real, and if we had more adequate knowledge of its nature, we could power the entire planet from a cupful of it. Like the river of life, there is only one of it. It's all-encompassing. It is, Gurdjieff keeps reminding us, omnipresent. And lest we might imagine that we know what he means by this, he gives it a mind-stopping name, Okidanok. But every time he mentions Okidanok, he calls it omnipresent. And lest we might imagine that we know what he means by this, that means We are actually now sitting on it, breathing it, seeing it in every form, hearing it in every sound, smelling and tasting it in every smell or taste all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Does that change your view? Try to experience this and absorb it at the cellular rather than the mental level. From the other side of the street, the great spiritual masters and poets in every tradition have always spoken of it as a field. One of the greatest contemporary Tibetan Dzogchen masters, Namkhe Norbu Rinpoche, never tires of saying that the root of compassion is the presence or the field of awareness. Or, he sometimes says, the awareness that comes through an experience of presence. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is about to go into battle, he asks Krishna, "What is the secret of immortality?" And Krishna replies, "Know yourself as the field and the knower of the field." Krishna was not talking about the battlefield, but of the great field in which both war and peace are totally and equally accepted. And then there is Rumi beckoning with, "Out beyond all knowing there is a field. I'll meet you there." It is perhaps impossible to really meet another person anywhere else. Only in that field of presence, which we can share at this moment together. What Gurdjieff calls I, as in I am, Rumi calls you. Both are looking for a way to say that that is not me. So Rumi sings, "When a man and a woman become one, that one is you. And when that one is obliterated, there you are." But then my mind gets into the act and points out that you does not mean the other any more than I means me. The mystery is real, the only reality. But it is not possible to box it in with words. It is, as we were saying, non-conceptual. Can we be aware of that? To be aware of the awareness is to remember the self. Only that can open our separate and separating analytical minds to a more intuitive, holistic perspective, a radically fresh view, which might allow us to be aware not only of the river, but of the boundless and formless ocean of life, of which you are, as I am, minuscule and very transient, but unique drops at this very moment. Who am I now What am I? What is me in this immense ocean, this reality? What is the self as distinct from me? What is the field of this energy that we call life? So many words masking our mental confusion, our inability to admit that we do not know and to quietly stay in front of the unknown. But all our inadequate words are pointing to the same human experience, which we might describe as the experience of being, for a moment or two, awake. The field is an analogy drawn from physics. The ocean is reminiscent of water, as is the river. And although there are field changes, particle wave fluctuations in the field, in the understanding of physics, it is perhaps easier to see that states can be very different if we use the alternative analogy of water. For we know that ice, water, and steam are all the same stuff in different energetic states. That gives us a more concrete way of thinking about changes of state or changes in the level of our attention in ourselves, such as the shift from our ordinary consciousness to self-consciousness, and then, if we are fortunate, to self-remembering, the ultimate unitive consciousness that experiences, perhaps in a flash, a state in which it is obvious that there is only one consciousness, one field, one ocean, one self, one I. Even the feeling invoked in many of us now, the feeling of sadness, that I do not experience that, is in fact proof of its reality. For if the innate sense of lack, of alienation, of being an exile here from another planet, another reality, another state of being, which is our birthright, from which I came and to which I will return, if that need was not natural and true, why would I ever feel this lack in myself? So if that is your experience, trust it and take courage from it for a deeper exploration into the mystery. This further exploration can be pursued not only with our minds, but with whatever in us comes from and still participates in the field or the ocean or the self. Call it what you like. It involves consciousness, presence, awareness, and attention. Self-remembering is not just remembering me or us. It is remembering a self that is not only in me and in you, but is literally omnipresent, which makes it impossible to conceptualize, but not impossible to feel. Indeed, Gurdjieff warned us not to think of real consciousness as a property of our minds. He said that the real consciousness and conscience are buried most of the time in our subconscious. But when I am most alive, I can feel or sense that I belong to that. In the most secret words of Vedanta, I am that. Tat Vam Asi. And from that experience, a new awareness is born. And we have a new responsibility to mature, to nurture the weak and vulnerable embryo of that. And with persistence, carry it to term before our planetary body dies. Do you hear that call? It did not come from this self-centered me, but it is real, and the awareness of this wordless presence changes everything. That's all I can say about it. So, may God be with you. Does that carry a different vibration for you now? It resonates in me, and it is my aim and wish with all my being, as Gurdjieff would say, in whatever time I may have left, to become more sensitive to that, so that less evil may enter through my sleep into God's creation. So please join me, and may you go further in this high endeavor than I have, building on all that we have been given in words and beyond words. So let's all of us try and stay with that quality of silence. That's self-remembering. That's the self in action in us now. That possibility, always, everywhere.